But Brandon, let's jump into our next topic. And what we are taking a look at is a little bit more of a deeper look at what we talked about in the first segment when it comes to the Big 12, but mainly one game's effect on what it could mean for the college football playoff. But before we get into that fully, we're going to look at the Red River rivalry going on this weekend. Number 19, Texas, going into, or they're the away team. Oklahoma's the home team at 5-0. They're the number 7 team in the country. Right now, if you looked at it, the matchup predictor on ESPN has Oklahoma at a 73% chance to win the game. Texas is a 26 or 27% to win the game this weekend. Before we get into what this could mean for the college football playoff, if like a Texas upsets Oklahoma, what are your thoughts about this game heading into this weekend?
Dickie, honestly, I look at this and I think, yeah, those predictors seem pretty right to me. Oklahoma, seeing what they did last weekend against the Baylor Bears, putting up 66 points. I know they allowed 33, and that's plenty of points to allow. But putting up 66 for Oklahoma with 6 touchdowns through the air for Kyler Murray, the guy who didn't get the start because he was late to practice on Friday. He missed 3 snaps, and they said, Kyler, go do your thing, buddy. And that's exactly what he did after Austin Kendall went a measly 0 for 2.
Well, he's got Kyler baseball on the mind.
Yeah. 432 yards on 17 of 21 passing. 17 of 21 passing. He was just precise with his passes. And 6 touchdowns, and added 1 on the ground on 10 carries for 45 yards. This Oklahoma team has so much firepower. And then defensively, they force 3 fumbles, recover 1. They sack Charlie Brewer 6 times. This was an incredible display by Oklahoma, minus allowing 33 points. It would have been a lot better. But they still win by 33 points. I just don't see a scenario, truly, I don't see a scenario where Texas wins this game. Not only are they not at home, they're going into an environment of a team that is so pumped right now, that is just on an absolute roll right now. Oklahoma seems to be doing no wrong, and while Texas has had a very good run, I think it might end here.
Well, and the only thing that helps Texas is they're not at home, but at least they're not at Oklahoma, as this is a neutral site game technically for the Big 12. And for me, Texas is the one I look at and I go, they're the biggest question mark to me, because it's like, wait a second, what Texas should I believe in? The Texas that opened the year, that blew the game to Maryland from game 1, or the one that barely beat a Tulsa team, or the one that blew out USC? I'm going to say 31-16. It was close for a while, but 31-16 beat TCU when many people thought they wouldn't, but then they only win 19-14 at Kansas State. And I know playing in Manhattan is tough in the Big 12, but it's like, what Texas team am I going to get? Am I going to get a Texas team that I've seen in these close games, or am I going to get a Texas team that hosted USC, hosted TCU? And I think that's the big thing of it, is this is a neutral site game, which means it is not in Austin, Texas. And is Texas just one of those teams this year that, hey, except for, even the Maryland game, that was a neutral site game as well, where most of the games that you've played away from Texas has either been a close loss that you lost to Maryland or a narrow victory 19-14. And for me, I'm not as far on the side of you as, like, I could see in my crystal ball, there is a reality where Texas wins this game. I just don't know how we get to it, because even if you look at the 2 games that were close for Oklahoma, Kyler Murray was good. I know the Army game, he didn't have as many attempts. He only had 15 attempts in that game, but still 11 of 15 on the game, only 165 yards, but 3 touchdowns in that game and only 1 interception. Now, Army's quarterback could have been why it was close because he had over 100 yards rushing on the night and had a touchdown of his own. But even look at the game against Iowa State where they only won by 10. They went into halftime up 24-10 in that game. Kyler Murray had 3 touchdowns, 348 yards in that one, to where I wonder if it's either going to be, can Texas's defense limit Kyler Murray, or can the Texas offense keep up with Lincoln Riley's fast-paced, high-scoring Sooners team?
I think that's the biggest key here, Ricky, is one, that Kyler Murray has actually only turned the football over 2 times on the season with 2 interceptions, and he has 17 passing touchdowns through the air. In their 5 games, they've put up 63, 49, 37, 28, and then 66. They're scoring almost 20 more points a game than Texas is, and of course they've play different schedules, face different opponents. Texas has faced a more difficult schedule with Maryland on there. They were a difficult opponent for Texas. They have been for 2 years in a row now. And with USC, and obviously USC is not what they have been, but that was looked at as being a very difficult game for Texas. TCU, that was supposed to be a difficult game, and then Kansas State, not looked at it a lot by being a supreme power, but Texas only beat them 19-14. While Texas is certainly allowing less points on the season per game than is Oklahoma. I want to see where's Texas going to come up with all these extra points that they're going to need to find to beat a team like Oklahoma. Now, because I don't see Texas being able to hold down Kyler Murray for a long time. Because if you think you've got him where you've stymied him in the passing game, all of a sudden he's running all over you. And when you finally think that, okay, we've stopped him from running, we're not going to allow him to run and get loose out of the pocket, well, then he's hanging in the pocket finding a way to beat you. That's why Kyler Murray is so good. That's why he I think, kind of solidified his name as a Heisman candidate this past weekend for sure. But you look at that and you think, how do you stop him? And how do you limit him? And if you limit him in one aspect, is he going to beat you in the other? And I'm not going to say that Oklahoma gets to their season average of 48 points per game. I'm not going to say that they will, but even if they, let's say, get to 35, Texas is only averaging 28. Are they able to find a way to get there? Because they haven't been putting up, a ton of points the way that Oklahoma has. And I guess I look at it as this is going to be, this is a game that has quite a lot at stake for the Big 12 in general. You throw in West Virginia there, and their chances go actually up or down based on who wins this game. But I want to know, because of how good Kyler Murray has been, and clearly in this last game for Oklahoma too, the running game was pretty good, even outside of Kyler Murray. What's Texas's game plan to come into this game and find a way to win? That's going to be the ultimate thing. Does Texas have a good enough game plan to shut down or limit enough Kyler Murray and the Sooners? And I'm not sure that they've got that game plan, because Murray is very good, and he has shown it time after time after time so far this season.
Yeah, and the game that I think back to, mainly because I was not shocked that they won, because I believe I picked them that week, but I was shocked to see the outcome of how far they jumped out, was that USC game where they end up winning 37-14. But if you look at that game, you had Sam Ellinger, who 2 touchdowns, no INTs, 22-3, 223 as on normal people say that, yards in that game. Whereas JT Daniels, no touchdowns, 1 INT, even though he had over 300 yards. the thing that I like from the quarterback play with Texas is that they haven't thrown an interception since game 1 against Maryland, and that might be the big thing alone. It might not be just yes, the game plan, X's and O's, like that's what the coaches are going to do. Duh, that's how you win the game. Boom, John Madden, however you want to look at it. But basically the just bonehead kind of answer is going to be whichever team forces the turnovers is going to win this game. And so far, you mentioned it, Kyler Murray only has 2 on the year. You look at Sam Ehlinger, too. He only has 2 on the year. So it's like, which one of these quarterbacks is going to make the mistakes? That is going to be, to me, the crux of this game is whichever quarterback makes the mistakes. It could be 1, could be 2, could be 3, could be 5. We don't know. But whichever quarterback makes more mistakes is the one whose team is going to lose. And you mentioned how much is riding on this game. I read them during our first segment, but if you're just checking us out on YouTube, right now, the chances to win the Big 12, 55% for Oklahoma, 11% for Texas. If Oklahoma wins, their odds jump up to 61, Texas falls to 6%. But if Texas wins this game, the Sooners fall to 36% chance, Texas goes up to 23% chance, which West Virginia would be in that same boat with 23%. And this question I'm going to ask you because it relates to what I wanted to bring in with the college football playoff, but this should probably be the informal way or the not PC way to ask this question is, should the Big 12, like the committee, the board, the directors who run the Big 12 conference, should they be rooting for Oklahoma in this one? I know that it's like, oh, you're not supposed to root. Anything that's good for the conference is good for the conference. Should they be rooting for Oklahoma in this one? Because, as we mentioned in our Dark Horse segment, if Oklahoma loses this game, then you're putting all your baskets in West Virginia to go undefeated. But then if Oklahoma then beats West Virginia, there's a chance that your team's, your conference's playoff chance goes to a big old fat goose egg because your top 2 teams have 1 loss.
I don't necessarily know if they, need to be rooting for Oklahoma for that. I think they want to be rooting for probably a good game on both sides, and they probably don't want to be rooting for a blowout because they certainly don't want to see that, because at the end of the day, let's say Oklahoma loses and it is their only loss on the season, but it's a 1 to 5 point loss, let's put it in there, and depending on what everyone else does, maybe Oklahoma still has a chance at that point. So I don't think you necessarily want to be rooting for Oklahoma. I think you want to just be rooting for a good game.
How do you think this is going to affect the playoff? If Oklahoma wins, do they get in? Well, I know it depends on what they do against West Virginia later, but what do you think happens if Oklahoma wins? What do you think could happen if Texas wins in terms of the college football playoff?
I think that if, I think if Oklahoma wins the rest of the way out, they've got Baylor on the road at Oklahoma State, which has been a very inconsistent team. West Virginia is going to be their biggest one. I'm looking at Texas's schedule. So for Oklahoma, they would be playing on the road at TCU. TCU, it kind of goes true for TCU. They've been a bit of an up and down team. State they should be able to handle. Texas Tech showed that they can put up a lot of offense. Then they've got that Oklahoma State team, again, an up and down team. They've got a Kansas team who shouldn't even be having a football program. And then you've got on the road to West Virginia. I like Oklahoma's schedule kind of the rest of the way. Here's the whole thing for me. If they win, their chances for me to be alive for the college football playoff will come down to the November 23rd game on the road at West Virginia. I really do. I think that will be what it comes down to, because I think West Virginia has a road where they could possibly win all the rest of their games, and it could come down to that final game. For Texas, they already have a loss on their schedule, And for Texas, they play that Oklahoma game. They'll play Baylor, should win. They play on the road at Oklahoma State, and again, that's a team where I think that Oklahoma State, they've been up and down. They'll play West Virginia at home. West Virginia's team, again, they're a team that has a lot of offense and finds a lot of ways to score. And then they'll play on the road at Texas Tech. And then they'll play ISU in Kansas to close out the season. So the road for Texas, I think, is more difficult, especially with already a loss on the schedule. For Oklahoma, I think it's a little bit better because they have no loss. That's, we're assuming that, let's say Oklahoma for them, they win the game. You look at the rest of their schedule, they're not looking too bad until that final game. For Texas, if they win, they still have just that one loss, but there's many more chances for them to have another loss. 2 losses, you're really kind of down in the weeds. There's really not a whole lot of chance for you to be able to come out of that. Not a whole lot of chance. We've seen crazy things happen in college football, but I think that would be really tough. I think that we're going to see a pretty good football game, but it may only be for a little bit. I think that one team's going to have an upper hand in this one.
I'm going to say this. If Texas wins this game, then the Big 12 is not making the college football playoff. Like, if you are a fan of the Big 12 and want a Big 12 team in the college football playoff, you are rooting for the Sooners this weekend because, yes, Texas could technically win out, but like you said, there are more opportunities for them to lose. Texas Tech is on the road. They've been a good team this year. You've got ranked Oklahoma State. You've got West Virginia, although that one being at home could help out Texas. Oklahoma is a team, their schedule, yes, they play the same teams. They play Texas Tech on the road. They play Oklahoma State. They play West Virginia, and that one is even in Morgantown. It's not even in Norman to end the regular season, but I feel like either West Virginia or Oklahoma have to go undefeated for a Big 12 team to make the college football playoff, because to me, there's only one conference that could have a one-loss team make the playoff, and that is the SEC. You look at Alabama, they've been as dominant as ever. And yes, they play LSU. That's going to be a tough one in November. They play Auburn in the Iron Bowl to end the year. Georgia as well. They've been a team where I think their closest win came to Mizzou, 43-29. So they've been just as dominant. But yet again, they'll get Florida. They're going to get a stretch where they get at LSU, home against Florida, at Kentucky, home against Auburn. So Georgia will be tested in that October, November months. Ohio State, right now I think they are, I know it's ludicrous to say this, I think either them or Alabama are the favorites, and I think Ohio State, based on their schedule, is the favorite for me to get into the playoff because they just got through their toughest opponent. It's fast forward that season to the last game of the year between them and Michigan, because I think they win every single one, even that Michigan game as of right now. And then you got Clemson. And the thing about Clemson that is interesting is that Trevor Lawrence injury. Right now they were saying, we're recording this on Monday night, he could practice Monday. We don't know what that neck strain injury is going to be. And if he does miss time, if he does play and has to come out, if there will be an opponent that jumps on Clemson and beats them if Lawrence has to come out of a game. So, there's some questions with the top 4, but I feel like if you're wanting a Big 12 team in the playoff, Oklahoma's got to win this weekend, because if Texas wins, they might just put a gun to the playoff chances of the Big 12 and be pulling the trigger with a win in the Red River Showdown this weekend.
Yeah, and Ricky, I think when you look at and examine the top 4 right now, I know that that's not what this segment necessarily is, but it could kind of go to where we're talking here. With Alabama, there's really nothing to worry about until it's LSU and it's Auburn. And I think probably at this point a little bit maybe more LSU than it is Auburn if you're going to worry about either one of them. At Clemson, you shouldn't worry about any other team on your schedule right now, and I'm being completely honest about that. NC State has not looked as strong as I thought that they would this season, and no one else on Clemson's schedule looks difficult at all. For Georgia, I think that you take a look at them and you almost maybe want to think that game against Kentucky is going to be exciting or interesting, but I don't necessarily know if that's going to be something that turns into anything. The LSU game on the road, okay, that could be interesting too, because Jake Fromm hasn't necessarily come out of the gate firing every single week. So there's still some questions here for Georgia as they have LSU, Florida, Kentucky, Auburn, 4 games straight in a row, and they've got 2 of those on the road, LSU and Kentucky. Those will both be interesting games, but all 4 of them will certainly be interesting. And then who's the last team that I haven't talked about? Oh, and then that's going to be Ohio State. This past week, I think you're right, Ricky. I really think that this was probably the most difficult game on their schedule. I still like to believe that Indiana is going to be somewhat fun, and Indiana's going to come out.
They usually try to make it fun
and attack them, right away. But they play Michigan State on the road. Michigan State, I thought, for a minute was going to lose to Central Michigan, and I was going to have a bit of a blow up because I'm like, what is wrong with these idiots? And then the Michigan game will be an interesting one. We'd like to at least make it an interesting one at the end of the year. But right now, for Clemson, in my mind, they're locked. Also, in my mind, Alabama's locked. The way that they've played, the way they've put up points, everyone thought that the Alabama-Texas A&M game was going to be something after what Texas A&M did to Clemson. No, not the case. It was pretty dull. Alabama had the upper hand for most of the game. And so that's why I locked those 2. Georgia I can't lock yet. And Ohio State, I had pretty much locked them. So that final spot is I don't want to say up for grabs, but if you look at all of it and you want to do hypotheticals, which we love to do in this type of situation. So we'll hypothetically speak that the final spot is up for grabs. That is why this weekend is so important for Oklahoma, and that is why the Sooners need this big time, because if they get this, they'll be undefeated heading into the rest of their schedule, which that scares me the most, and the rest of their schedule comes down to that final game against West Virginia. So this is a big must for the Oklahoma Sooners.
Yeah, and I mean, the last thing I'll say, especially about the top 4, the SECs, we've talked about it ad nauseum. They all play the same opponents. Ohio State, that Michigan team looks a little bit better than the team we saw week 1 against Notre Dame, although they looked better later in that game after halftime than they did in the first half. That one could still be tough, but, I mean, Jim Harbaugh's proven that he can't beat the Buckeyes, so why should you have faith in Michigan in that one? And then Clemson, they've got a quarterback injury, and if the next strain is no problem and Lawrence goes out there, then I have all the confidence in the world that this Clemson team will finish undefeated. But and I know that their backup quarterback looked good in the game against Syracuse, but let's put them under fire against some of these teams in the ACC. Anything can happen on any given Saturday. There's also LSU, if they finish undefeated. Notre Dame, they've got a big game this weekend against Virginia Tech that could change everything. So I think this game is interesting, but if you're a Big 12 fan, like I said, you're rooting for Oklahoma, because Oklahoma and West Virginia are your only chances to make the college football playoff. But this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you guys think down below in that comment section. What are you thinking about the game? What do you think it means for the college football playoff? And what are your kind of thoughts about the college football playoffs in general? Let us know what you guys think down below in that comment section.